As this virus continues to ravage the world, there are also questions about how this all started. Some say that it was a wet market inside Wuhan, that may be to blame, and that these types of places pose a risk to us all. But is that true? Our Maggie Rulli files this report.
China is now reporting many more cases of SARS.
The outbreak spreads. More people infected this morning with that dangerous new strain of bird flu.
A new front opening in the fight against Ebola.
Word of a deadly illness arriving in America for the first time. It is called MERS.
The new coronavirus may be the first pandemic in recent memory to shut down the world, but it's not the first of its kind, and scientists say it won't be the last.
We'll never be able to be risk-free. There will always be potential of spillover as we co-evolve on this planet. That's the way it's going to be.
About 3/4 of all infectious diseases originate in animals, some exotic, others from livestock like chickens. Even the seemingly cute and cuddly, all could be vectors for highly infectious, potentially deadly, novel virus outbreaks in humans through contact or consumption. And many scientists fear wildlife wet markets, where thousands of people and animals gather together, are a breeding ground for outbreaks.
I think they should shut down those things right away.
The nation's leading infectious disease expert, Dr. Anthony Fauci, tells Fox and Friends that now is the time to act.
It boggles my mind how when we have so many diseases that emanate out of that unusual human-animal interface that we don't just shut it down.
At least 60 U.S. lawmakers have signed on to a global ban. And some members of Congress are even threatening political action.
And they need to pay a price. We need to start changing the way we trade until they shut these wet markets down. Shut the wet markets down.
Threats of a global trade war over what? Wet markets are common in Southeast Asia and China, some selling and slaughtering live animals.
We just need to ban these markets of live animals for commercial purposes, because that will reduce the hazard and the risk for spillover to humans.
Dr. Christian Walzer calls these markets cauldrons of contagion.
You're bringing together animals from a large variety of geographic locations. These are wild animals which would never meet each other in real life. And you just create this artificial interface here where all these animals come together, you stack them on top of each other, and they will just be shedding viruses and exchanging viruses. And then add into the mix, thousands and thousands of people that come to visit and go shopping there every day. You have a perfect interface where you can get viruses to jump over from animals into humans.
It was under these conditions in this walled-off building now under guard in Wuhan, China, that it's believed some of the first cases of COVID-19 were discovered at the Hunan Seafood Wholesale Market. Here, you could buy livestock familiar to so many of us in the West, but there was also an entire wild animal section that offered things like porcupines, snakes, and baby crocodiles. And while scientists have not yet been able to confirm the exact sequence of events, most believe it started in a bat, an animal known for carrying dangerous viruses. It's then thought to have jumped to an intermediate animal, perhaps a snake or a pangolin, before jumping to a human.
It's really important to understand the difference between domestic animal and livestock production, where we've co-evolved with livestock for thousands of years, 5,000, 6,000 years and more. And we really know a lot about diseases that livestock harbor and poultry. But we know just about nothing about what disease agents wildlife can harbor. They think there's about 700,000 viruses just in mammals and birds, which could potentially cause zoonotic disease in humans.
But the growing calls to shut down all wet markets because of their mortal threat may be excessive. Only a small percentage of wet markets are known as wildlife markets, where they sell wild animals for meat or as pets, often mixing livestock with illegal wildlife for sale. But the vast majority are similar to farmers markets, selling everything from fish and meat to non-perishables, and they are integral to daily life in much of Asia. In newly reopened Wuhan, we met this man. He's shopping for tofu, vegetables, and other food staples for his family. He says wet markets are essential for daily life here. And even though Western supermarkets are gaining in popularity, most still rely on places like this. When Wuhan went under lockdown as infections and deaths surged, it was this massive wet market that residents relied on for survival. These stalls providing enough food to feed the entire city of 11 million for nearly 3 months. The World Health Organization acknowledges that wet markets are an important source of affordable food and livelihood for millions of people, but saying that in many places they've been poorly regulated and poorly maintained.
WHO's position is that when these markets are allowed to reopen, it should only be on the condition that they conform to stringent food safety and hygiene standards.
Adding that governments must rigorously enforce bans on the sale and trade of wildlife for food. After the last major bird flu outbreak less than a decade ago, most livestock and poultry slaughter were moved away from these facilities. And after this current outbreak, the Chinese government has banned the trade and consumption of wild animals for food. But there are concerns about how well these restrictions will be enforced. And the government has not yet banned the commercial sale of wild animals for pets, traditional medicine, or ornamental uses. And there are fears that even as these illegal markets are shut down, the wildlife trade will simply move online, a place that's already beginning to gain in popularity.
Most of the wet market is not a problem whatsoever. It's actually only the wildlife trading component, which honestly can be huge.
Dr. Walser says the entire chain of wildlife trade is a threat.
We're very focused on the market at the moment, and everyone talks about the market, but there's a whole trade chain where these animals come in contact with humans. So the spillover can happen anywhere along that chain.
Official Chinese figures for wildlife trade and consumption show that it was a $74 billion industry, providing work for 14 million people over the past decade. These exotic animals are often a luxury or used in ancient medicine, but certain animals are also eaten in rural areas, similar to how some Americans eat game, like deer.
Live animals is really a specialty in Southeast Asia, and the sheer size and magnitude of animals which are being traded is unique to Southeast Asia and China.
It's a big business to stop. But for the first time, Dr. Walser says he feels he has international support.
There's no going back. I mean, these past 12 to 14 weeks have changed the world. So I'm very, very optimistic that we'll move forwards, and within the next 6 to 12 months, we'll have legislation in place throughout all these countries.
Speaking before Congress on Wednesday, Dr. Walser argued that it's going to take a collective global approach to shut down this trade. With an estimated 1.7 million undiscovered viruses out there in wildlife, Dr. Walser calls on the U.S. to lead this mission, saying the focus now needs to be on shutting down the illegal wildlife trade and stopping the spread of the next pandemic before it starts.
It's really, just to say it's unfortunate is not putting it hard enough. It's really very sad to see that it's taken this pandemic, basically, and all the suffering that goes with it and the economic devastation and so on, to actually make us realize that the costs involved, that the costs sort of generated by the legal and illegal trade in wildlife can never, ever be justified.
Maggie Rulli, ABC News, London.
Really illuminating reporting. Our thanks to Maggie for that.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.